Now that we've seen the entirety of Season 1 of The Wheel of Time, let's take a look at some of the biggest changes between the books and the show. Some of which are good, some of which are bad, and some are, well... Nonetheless, given that we are trying to cram 14 books into a TV adaptation, there are bound to be some changes. And we'll be taking a look at each of these in chronological order of the episode. So, obvious spoilers for The Eye of the World and Season 1 of The Wheel of Time. And while we don't have enough time to cover every single change, you can leave a comment down below and let me know if you thought we missed one or we should go back and add one. Also, there may be some changes that do appear in the episode, but we'll talk about later because that ties into later episodes, so keep that in mind as well. Episode 1, Leavetaking, begins with Leandrin chasing down a male channeler who was already going mad with the sickness and the taint of the male half of the power. She gentles him, and overlooking the event is Moraine and Lan, who are hunting for the Dragon Reborn. Moraine mentions that there are believed to be 4 Ta'Viren in the 2 rivers. These would include Rand al'Thor, Matrim Coffin, Perrin, Abara, and Egwene al'Vir, though she doesn't know who any of them are yet because she hasn't gone to the 2 rivers. This is already a possible change, as it's never specifically said that Egwene is a Ta'Viren or not, and many fans actually have speculated and debated over this. It would certainly add credence to her actions if she was, but it may also diminish them, as it would mean that the pattern is making her big events in the series happen, as opposed to those being accomplishments of her own. This is changed even further in the show, as it's later revealed by Padan Fain, who begins to explain that all 5 of them, including Nynaeve, are Ta'Viren. And speaking of Nynaeve, we see a scene of her pushing Egwene into the river as part of the Women's Circle ceremony. I actually thought this was a cool scene to add, and it provides a narrative going forward as Rand and Egwene struggle a bit with their relationship, which, by the way, is also way further along as it is in the books. In both the books and the show, we see a handful of people arriving for Winter Night in Beltane, the town's festival. In both, we see Padan Fain the peddler, who has an interesting conversation with Mat in the show, as he has clearly met him a handful of times, and he has had deals with Mat in the past. Mat's actually trying to buy lanterns for his sister, and Mat steals a gold bracelet from a girl at the Winespring Inn, and you could certainly argue that his character in the show is already a bit on the darker side, a bit more crass, but the performance by Barney Harris is excellent. It's unfortunate that he will not continue as Mat later on in the series. They also show Mat as being down on his luck, so this in combination with his already a little bit darker side, I feel like will be a much bigger event when he gets cured from the dagger, and it will make him shift into the character he is in the books. Tom Merrilin, the Gleeman we see in episode 3, is actually there for Beltane and Winter Night in the books, and he will actually accompany our group to Shadar Logoth before being attacked by a Fade and is presumed dead until book 2 or season 2. But I actually think I like the way they changed it. It gives him a bit more time and focus in episodes 3 and 4, and his story for the most part I think works out the same in season 1. He's just not here for episode 1. Another change is the way that Moraine shows up just as Beltane and the village festival is about to begin. She arrives in the tavern, has a stare down with Nynaeve, and everyone in the town is immediately scared, frightened, and curious as to why she's there. In the book, she actually shows up during all of the commotion of everyone coming into the town, and a lot of her story is actually told through off-screen events. We're told that the boys were given coins by Moraine, which actually prove useful later, as it's a way for her to track them once they all get split up following the events with Shadar Logoth. Some of the scenes we get with Tam al'Thor, Rand's father, are similar to how they are in the books. We see Tam and Rand on the road when something causes some rocks to fall down a hill. Rand pulls out his bow and aims at it, but doesn't see anything. This is sort of what happens in the books. However, Rand sees a hooded figure all in black, and the rider is totally covered in his cloak so that no part of him is showing. When he looks at him, Rand actually feels that the rider hates everything that's alive, but him above all things. Rand stumbles, and Tam asks him what's wrong, but when they look down the road again, it's empty. Tam reminds him of the flame and the void, a thing that he's taught Rand that he should concentrate on one flame and feed all of his passions in it until his mind becomes empty and he focuses on the void. The flame void itself is incredibly important, and I hope it's something that they actually build up. They sort of focus it on a little bit of it in episode 7 when Rand is trying to shoot arrows and he keeps missing until he focuses in and is hearing and thinking more more about the visions of his past, and it's in episode 7 where he realizes he's the dragon. The flame of the void refers to a visualization of a single flame of a candle into which the person could throw all of their emotions, fears, and obstacles which block them from performing. All concerns, thoughts, even the concerns of life and death, can be learned to be fed into the flame. This allows the user to perceive reality cleared from everything distracting. It's just such a cool part of Rand, and he's always reflecting back on it in the books. I do really hope that they go back and cover in that. I do think they missed an opportunity here to have it in there, especially as it's one of the first things we see in the books. Towards the end of episode 1, once the Trollix attack, we actually get to see Moiraine versus the army of Trollix. In the books, we just know that she fought against them, so this was a change I actually appreciated. Some of the townsfolk tell Rand what happened once he comes down and brings his father to be healed. Rand is told of how Moiraine called a ball of lightning down from the sky, and Land was like a whirlwind with his sword, that he was a weapon himself, seeming to be in 10 places at once fighting the Trollix. We do actually still see the Trollix attack Rand and Tam gets injured. However, in the books, we get a fever dream where Tam begins saying all of the things about finding a young boy, and Rand begins to remember this throughout the whole book. It's a scene that actually explains just a little bit early on that Rand may not actually be Tam's son. They do go back and cover this in episode 7, and probably the single coolest scene of all of season 1, but we'll come back and talk a lot more about that when we do our episode 7 breakdown. We also see Perrin as he is attacked by the Trollix, and he accidentally kills his wife. I mean, talk about a big change there, but it does serve as a reason for Perrin to question violence and compare it to the Way of the Leaf throughout season 1. And while on one hand it is a big change because it happens so early in the show, I don't think it actually drastically changes the pace of his character's arc. And there are some who believe that she was actually secretly a dark friend. Come back to our episode 3 video when we cover that, or check out our full video on that theory on our channel as well. Moving on, just like the books, Moiraine comes over and heals Tam al'Thor. However, the conversation is a bit bigger, and Lan asks Rand where he got his sword in the books, and if there is a heron on it. This sets up the fact that Tam al'Thor's sword is special and typically wouldn't belong to a sheep herder. They have shown us a bit of it throughout the season. They actually flash and show the heron on the blade when Tam pulls it out against the Trollix in episode 1, and it gets expanded upon just a bit further in episode 8. But it's such an important part of the books, the idea of being a blade master and the heron marked blade and why they're so important. I do hope this gets expanded upon further, and we've also done a video on this explaining just what a blade master is if you want to check that out. Moving on, Moiraine explains that the Dark One are there after the 4 of you in the show. This is definitely a huge change here because they give the idea that a female could be the dragon, which comes up throughout all of season 1 and was kind of a cool change to make it interesting even for the book readers. In the books, however, she tells this to Mat, Perrin, and Rand, and that the Dark One will keep coming after them, so it's not safe to stay in the 2 rivers. Kind of like what we see in the show, just slightly different, with Egwene being a potential candidate for the dragon. So by the end of the episode, we still are actually at roughly the same place we are in the books, except for the biggest change of probably all of season 1, with the exclusion of the prologue of Eye of the World. They tried to dive into it just a little bit in the sort of cold open of episode 8. Now, I don't necessarily think we would cold open the show with that scene, but it's just so important to the overall story that I thought we would perhaps get it in season 1. And they kind of touch on it just very, very, very briefly in episode 8. I thought maybe we would get something of it throughout season 1. It could have been in the cold open, perhaps, of episode 1, kind of like how Galadriel explains the ring in the Fellowship of the Ring, but we didn't get it, and I do hope that at some point we get that scene because it's just so important. But with that, that's our episode 1 breakdown. Be sure to stay tuned for our episode 2 breakdown. Let us know if we missed anything, or if you thought there was something that we should have added, or something they should have added in season 1 in general. As always, thank you for watching, and remember that the grave is no bar to our call.